We have a lot to cover this morning. I want to start out by recognizing that last night was supposed to be a Shiru Shabbat commemorating Martin Luther King Day, and we were going to bring Pastor Dumasani Washington to VBS. He had a tragedy in his own personal life, and we had the tragedies of the fires, and not everybody was located in this area. And yet we still lay the groundwork, as I had hoped, for greater relationship between the Jewish and Black communities here in Los Angeles. And I'd like to welcome my new friend, Bishop Manning, to Valley Beth Shalom. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're honored to have you. I hope this is the first of many times. In a few moments during the Torah reading, we're going to all, as a community, rise and have an aliyah and gomel bench together for surviving the wildfires and for being amongst the lucky in this community, especially that the fires did not cross over into this community. And all of that is a good rabbi trick, because that's not what I'm about to talk about. What I am going to talk about is the Parsha this morning, Parsha Shemot. Many of us think about the Parsha in terms of slavery and redemption, physical slavery and redemption, meaning to say, we were slaves, it was difficult, the Torah describes how harsh it was to make bricks, and we had to physically move out of Egypt in order to gain our freedom. But today I'd like to talk about a different kind of slavery and a different kind of freedom. I'd like to talk about it through the spiritual lens. Because the spiritual kind of slavery and the spiritual kind of liberation is a different note altogether. And it shouldn't be lost on us that when liberation comes, no matter for what people we're talking about, when liberation comes, it always comes in the form of a spiritual leader, not in the form of a political leader. Meaning to say, Moses spoke to God and brought that message to the Jewish people and led us to Mount Sinai, and that qualified him to teach us about how it is that we should view ourselves and view the world. And in American terms, the civil rights movement did not begin in a courthouse, and it certainly didn't begin in the halls of Congress. It began in a church outside of Atlanta, Georgia, with a young preacher who would teach this country how we should see ourselves differently, how we should behave differently. Exodus comes along, and the story tells us that Pharaoh, in stages, began to enslave the Jewish people. And in his commentary, in his questioning, the great Lebovitz Rabbi explains that when Pharaoh says, when there is a Jewish boy, cast him into the river, and a Jewish girl you shall let live, why does the Torah need to mention to us that Pharaoh says for the girl, let her let live? It would have been enough for Pharaoh just to say, for all Jewish boys, cast them into the river. But by the point that we're enslaved in Egypt, the Jewish people felt grateful to Pharaoh for letting our daughters live. The Jewish people misunderstood that the lives of our daughters should be attributed to the grace of Pharaoh, rather than understanding correctly that all life emanates from a source far more powerful than lives and breathes and rules in this world. And it was that spiritual slavery fostered that misunderstanding that we lived at the whim of others. We lived according to the will of when others would allow our children to live or to die. And it took Moses coming onto the scene, walking up to the Jewish people, teaching us not only physically to move ourselves, but spiritually to move ourselves, for us to understand that our children should not live at the whim of others. Why do I bring this up this week? I bring it up this week because we returned from Israel only 10 days ago on our most recent VBS volunteer mission. And this community, unlike most American Jewish communities, has had the honor to spend time with so many of the hostage families. On our first VBS mission last December, we sat with the Adar family in Hostage Square. We've welcomed the Bravslavsky family to our community. We just sat last week with the Rabbi family at Hostage Square, and of course this community maintains a special relationship with the Goldberg-Poland family, and we mourned at the tragic ending of Hirsch's story. This week, the Jewish people is engaging in a deal that we have to make. And we must not understand or misunderstand what's going on in the world as some kind of victory for any political figure. In doing so, we misunderstand who we serve and who we are as a people. Our children aren't freed because of the will of some political leader. Our children simply deserve to be free. And if the world doesn't understand that, then the world is simply wrong. And we live in this time in a type of Egypt. And someone must stand in front of the Jewish people and explain that any political leader who gives himself or herself credit for freeing Jewish toddlers and freeing Jewish elderly and freeing Jewish Holocaust survivors who were kept in tunnels and cages should not be considered a leader of this people. Because any pat on the back is a betrayal of how I understand that we should live. The freedom should begin with an apology to every Jewish family who's been engaged in this nightmare for more than 14 months. This past week, my teacher, Rav Adin Steinsaltz, his teaching circulated his commentary on Parshat Shemot. And he wrote, in contrast to Genesis, Exodus tells the story of the Jewish people as a nation unified by the shared experience of Egyptian exile and eventual redemption. The Exodus story becomes central to Jewish identity not merely as a historical event, but as a framework for understanding the cycles of struggle and renewal that define Jewish existence. From a Jewish perspective, Exile is not just a physical displacement, but a profound state of disconnection and disharmony. It is the awareness of being in a place or a situation that is fundamentally not where our children belong. For the last year and a half, we have lived in a situation in which many of our children did not live in the place in which they belong. Many of our people did not live in the place in which they belong. The urge of many in this world is going to be to take credit for this kind of breakthrough. I continue day in, day out to misunderstand the credit that's attributed to anybody. And so I want to gather my community together and explain to you. Our children belong amongst us. And any time that doesn't happen, it's a tragedy. And the reason that I know that you know this is because when your kids go to college, and I ask you, how's it going in college? You tell me, oh, it's fantastic. They join the Jewish fraternity, or they join the Jewish sorority, or they found Jewish friends, or they live in this city and they just joined the Jewish YPO. You respond back to me in the positive when your kids find other Jewish community. That's what we want for our children. That's what we know that our kids need in order to flourish, to be the best people that they can be, because Jews are not meant to live alone. Jews are meant to belong with each other. We do our best for ourselves and for humanity when we're surrounded by one another. And so, there couldn't be a simcha more befitting this morning than a bat mitzvah, a celebration telling a young woman that you belong here in this community, you belong here at this Torah. But I want us all to leave the synagogue this morning understanding what we're about to see unfold this week and for several weeks upcoming. We're about to see families reunited. We're about to see families faced with the harsh truth that they'll never be reunited. We're about to see the trading of human life. And I'd have to argue as a rabbi, not as an economist, that the market value for human life is far greater than what we're even paying. There isn't an amount of terrorists worthy of kfir bibis. Let's all be clear. 10,000 isn't equal to the value of kfir bibis's life. The idea that the world makes us a sign of value is a betrayal of the most basic form of humanity. The idea that the world didn't assemble some kind of special force to stand up and say, in this world, no matter what tactic you use, we may not steal one another's children, is a betrayal to humanity. And this week, we're going to watch that betrayal and we're going to participate. We're going to participate because it's the world in which we live. But between you and me, we'll know that this deal that we have to make to bring back all of these Jewish children, it's awful. It's awful. And the world and all world leaders have betrayed us. And anybody who stands at a microphone in the coming weeks to give themselves credit, rather than getting down on their knees and begging for forgiveness, let each one of us judge for ourselves. May all those who are returned home in the coming weeks have the ability to heal. May all those families who find their loved ones after 15 months have the ability to heal. And may God be with us and help heal and bring comfort to all those who find out devastating truths in the coming days. May this community stand in solidarity with Jews everywhere as we watch what I think will be one of the ugliest chapters of Jewish history unfold in live television. And may we not celebrate any political leader who stands before us and tries to beg for credit for doing, for enacting, for reversing one of the great crimes against humanity in modern times. Let us all have the strength to withstand these news, and let us all say, Amen.